Hey guys, sorry I missed last week. I had some stuff going on, but I'm back and I'm ready to go. Let's do it. The week 1 game of the week, Dan versus myself. Dan had a lot to say about the matchup. He hasn't really been heard from since, so I hope he's okay. If anyone knows about his well-being, please let me know so I can rest easy at night because I really put it on him on the first week. Now let's move on to week 2 with their high score being Weber scoring 152 points. Marvin Jones leading the way for him with over 40 points. Your low score of the week was Nick with only 70 points. He mentioned to me after the week 1 wrap-up that he would really like to be mentioned in these videos. I'm not sure this is the way you should try to get mentioned in a video as being the low score of the week, but nevertheless, Nick, there you go, low score of the week. I just want to take a moment to acknowledge Walsko's start. They're starting 3-0, probably his best start in a long time in this league, and this is all being done without Jamal Charles. Hopefully, he can keep it together the rest of the year and put together a nice playoff run. Speaking of Walsko's division, he's in the light division. He's obviously at top at 3-0. Kevin and myself are right behind him at 2-1. In the premium division, we have a 5-way tie. Everyone at 2-1 with Kyle, Nick, Baus, Craig, and Dan. The big news this week, Dan pulling off 2 trades. I've heard a ton of rumblings, asking me things like, is Dan bribing people? Is Dan blackmailing people? People just can't understand what Kyle and Eric were thinking in these trades they did with Dan. I personally am at a loss, so I don't have a lot of explanation for you guys. The one thing I do know is that Dan is far too cheap to bribe anyone, and I'm not sure he knows Eric or Kyle well enough to have any dirt on them to blackmail them. We'll just have to see how these play out. In week 1, Dylan's pick of the weeks didn't go as well as expected. I only went 1-3, but at least I got my upset of the week right. This week's Dylan's picks are sponsored by Magners, as you might have guessed. It's a fine Irish cider, and here we go. Give me Nick over Kevin. My second pick, we have Dan versus Dan, otherwise known as the Dan Bowl. As you may recall, this is how Dan and Loser Dan got their titles. Loser Dan had lost to Dan Herms, thus being known henceforth as Loser Dan. Whoever loses this year will obviously take the title Loser Dan. My pick is that Dan Herms remains Dan Herms and Loser Dan remains Loser Dan. And my upset of the week this week is Mark dethroning Kyle from his perfect 3-0 start. Do it for me, Mark. That brings us to the week 4 game of the week. I have Nick versus Kevin, both sitting at 2-1, both trying hard to stay atop their divisions. ESPN has Nick favored by a bit, but I think it's going to be a really close game. I can't wait to see what happens. And that's it for the week 3 wrap-up. I'll see you guys in week 4.